Hello, garden friends. You can tell I'm probably in a good mood because I'm carrying a plant, specifically a tree peony. So we're gonna plant a beautiful tree peony in this. I happen to have a hole here from something a few years ago. Now, I am behind what I call my garden shed. It really kind of squares in my backyard really nicely. And this is one of the first beds I really started working on when I moved into my house 15 years ago now, if you can believe it. And there was really nothing here. There was nothing down here at all. And I widened the bed. I have it going along the whole back of the shed here. And I've really planted a mix of perennials. It's a little bit more cottage style. There's lots of peonies, so it's kind of a heavy spring bed. Then there's lots of salvia, there's lots of hardy geraniums, there's geum, there's some millennium allium, some summer blooming allium, but there's also some gladiator, or no, these are globemaster, I think, globemaster allium, which are the spring blooming bulbs. So there's really a mix. There's some calamint, some humulobetony. It's really a pretty bed, but I love tree peonies. So if you followed me, you know that I've talked about a lot of different peonies, 3 or 4 in particular, which are herbaceous peonies, the more traditional garden peony. There's Ito peonies, which are a cross between, and I'll show you all these here in a little bit, a cross between a tree peony and a herbaceous peony. And then there is a tree peony, which is what we're gonna plant today. And I'll show you kind of the differences, how you can tell. There's also fern leaf peonies, you know, the smaller ones that bloom really early. So I would say we're having a really early year. Everything is really almost in full bloom. You can see the above and beyond rows. We'll look at that here a little bit closer. We're going on a tour of this little area here. But the star of the show today is the tree peony. So in this area, you can see I have a couple feet in all areas, in all sides. You know, this Caradonna salvia is kind of inching over, but there was always more of a, I believe, I don't remember what was here, a different peony, I think, that for some reason either I took out or it didn't make it. And I do have a little bit of drip line in here, so I am gonna watch as I dig, and I can see what I always do when I know I have drip line. I'll bring you a little closer, is I go find it first and I bring it up to make sure I see it. But you know, this soil back here is really gorgeous. It's nice and rich. It's just dark black topsoil really for the most part. And so I'm never worried too much about the soil, but the one thing I will say is I've slowly over the years been trying to do a little bit more with soil health, because I think the one thing is we get used to the idea that if it looks nice, it must be good. And while it's great for drainage, it's great for, you know, a good medium for adding nutrients, it doesn't always mean it has the most nutrients it can. So really what I want to focus on today is making sure I add some nutrients to it and just make sure it's going to get off to the best start. It's a little bit of a tight fit back here, but I want to be able to show you kind of what I'm doing. So I have some spring blooming allium that are doing really well right now. I have my hole dug, but what I want to show you is what I did this year was when this bed in early spring, when I was wanting to clean off all of last year's debris, you know I always wait to do that, I kind of ripped everything off the bed. So any of the foliage from these millennium allium, any of the seed heads maybe that were left, the Caradonna salvia that was just kind of dormant and dry, and all the top growth, because they die back all to the ground pretty much along here, other than the boxwood behind me. I took all that foliage and growth and I put it onto the lawn right beside it. And then I took my mower and I just mowed it all up and mowed it right back on here. So what I was left was with this beautiful crushed up mulch. This is all the debris from last year's growth. So in this area, you know, in other areas, I use my chop and drop method with the push mower. I can't fit a push mower necessarily in here well around all the boxwood, and some of the peonies get a little bit more stocky stems on them that you don't quite want to mow all the way down because their crowns can be high. So instead what I did was any of the leaves and debris, because there's tree leaves that blow in here too, I took off and then I just mulched them up and blowed them right back onto this bed. So it really acts as a nice compost and mulch for this year. And as I'm working with it, I really like seeing it because it actually has helped suppress some weeds in open areas like this. So here I have my beautiful soil. But like I said, I'm gonna amend it a little bit. So I'm gonna add some plant tone. So plant tone from Espoma, what I like about it is it's a balanced fertilizer. It's organic. It's really hard to overdo an organic fertilizer. It's not synthetic. Synthetic ones can burn. You can overdo them if you don't really get your amounts right. Something like plant tone is more balanced because peonies don't really need heavily acidic things. They're not too picky. They just like to have a good nutrient-rich soil. So I'm also, of course, gonna add biotone. Biotone's gonna help get those roots really wanting to get acclimated and started in this hole. And I'm just kind of stirring that in. I always like to stir mine in a little bit. Once I have that hole ready, here comes the tree peony. Now I will say, generally, I would usually recommend that tree peonies like a little bit of afternoon shade. If you notice, this is a do as I say, not as I do. I am on the west side and it is the full brunt of sun right now, right? I am gonna have a tree that eventually will help do a little bit of shading, but that's gonna be a long time in the future. So I have right now 3 other tree peonies along here that are doing well and they've been in for a few years. So that's why I feel okay planting this one. I know I have to supplement with water some, especially in the summer when it gets dry. So the difference with the tree peony, as you can see right now, it looks pretty boring. It has more of a sturdy stem. And unlike herbaceous peonies or Ito peonies that die back to the ground like a perennial, this one you always leave its stem and you can do some light pruning on it, but you never want to cut it back to the ground. This is the form of the tree and it really will eventually have a nice kind of upper canopy. It does not grow into a huge tree. It stays, pretty small. Now these, what I usually notice is when you can find them, I think they're hard to find. Online you can buy bare root ones, but if you even find them, like I found one locally this year, and usually I lately have not been able to find them. They're a little bit pricier, but also they're usually probably purchased bare root from the nursery you would even get it from, and then they would start them off in soil like this. So don't be alarmed if the soil medium slightly wants to break apart a little bit. That's very normal, but the important thing is just to not plant it too deep. I'm still gonna watch where that crown is, and I can see I'm gonna plant it at the same level. That's what I wanna do. That's kind of really important with any peony. Now, as I'm planting it, I am going to amend slightly with some Land and Sea compost. Probably about half, 50-50. This could also act as a top dressing for a mulch along any of this flower bed. But if I can, I like to mix it in with my native soil when I'm planting something, just again, to add nutrients to the soil. This is a bed that I did add some compost this year just on top as I was cleaning it out. But it's not a bed I'm able to get in too much to because all the perennials, as you can see, I try to have them grow so they get so big and they really kind of take over. That's what I want. So once it's growing, you can't add too much to it. So when I am planting something, if I can, I like to make sure I add some compost, which just over time is gonna add more nutrients. So I thought I'd back up here and I'll show you the new one I planted first. And then I thought we could go through and kind of look at the different things that are blooming right now here. So right now it looks a little boring and sad, but I'll show you some different tree peonies I have and how they really start looking. So you can see the form of it right away is completely different than other peonies. It has that more kind of bark-like stems to it. And you can see, this is what you'll see in the spring when it's just beginning. The top growth will kind of die back and you'll be left with these stems. In the spring, you'll see these little eyes right here and they'll get little buds on them. And that's how you'll see the new growth in the spring, is out all those little buds. And then it will just kind of shrub out and kind of create an umbrella-like canopy with really big, beautiful blooms. I first experienced tree peonies when I was younger. Mom mail ordered a few. So I'm gonna say I was, 7 to 10 years old when I first experienced them. And we were in awe of the size bloom they could create. They've always been a little bit harder to find. Specialty nurseries, local nurseries, a lot of times will grow them because they're a little bit more of a plants person plant in the sense that they're a little bit, more costly, but they're also something that maybe people that collect plants, they like to have something extra and a little bit more fun. It's gonna be a tree peony. But I want to kind of go along here and talk about the different peonies and why I do love them. What is hard is they have a short season, right? So we're right now in later May and we've had a lot of heat. About a week ago, we started having 90-degree weather. Today now we have cooled off to beautiful, more seasonal temperatures, which will slow down peonies. But that heat really makes them go fast. So I want to go over some of my favorites. I have a lot of herbaceous ones like Sarah Bernhardt here. I have a couple of Sarah Bernhardt. That's the more classic, beautiful, ruffled, light pink flower. And I do cage my Sarah Bernhardts. They have, I think we can see it under here, a very heavy, there you can kind of see the tip of this. It's a very heavy wire peony cage, just to help them stay upright. Different varieties are better at staying upright, even herbaceous peonies. You can find some that stay up really well, others don't. Now in this bed also, there's lots of hardy geranium. I really love this one. I know it's a light color, but it's kind of one of my favorites, that cranesbill geranium. Then there's some geum beside it, which blooms early in the spring, but it's just kind of a pretty dainty small flower. Lots of different spring blooming allium along here. Right here is a Julia Rose Ito peony. So an Ito peony is a shrub peony, but it's a cross between a tree peony and a more general herbaceous peony like that one. What that means is it has much sturdier stems. I never have to cage these. They are always upright on their own. They have sometimes much bigger blooms, but also very more intense colors. They have contrasting, deeper colors. They're not as fragrant as a traditional garden peony, but they are so beautiful. And we'll look at some different ones here I have. The Caradonna salvia, you can see right here. Look how pretty that is. I dotted in a whole bunch more of it last year just because how can you go wrong with that? I love the deep purple stems, and I have a lot of Caradonna salvia across the way in that bed over by my pathway. But there's another big herbaceous peony here. The flies are over it right now because it has that sweet nectar. You know, a lot of people talk about the ants and they think they help open the flowers. They do not help open the flowers, but ants are attracted to the flowers because of that sweet nectar that comes out of them. So the herbaceous peonies will be blooming here probably within the week. If you want to, you can always pick them when they're at marshmallow stage. These are not marshmallow stage yet. Marshmallow stage is when they're a little bit bigger, just about to open. You can squeeze them like you can a big marshmallow. You can cut them, put them in a little bit of damp paper towel and some newspaper, and then in a plastic bag, and you can put them in the fridge for a few months if you want to. And they'll actually last, and when you bring them out, put them in water, and they will bloom. I haven't ever tried it with Ito or tree peonies. So here's one tree peony. This one's just a couple years old, and it has a little bit of the above and beyond rose bush coming out of it. So this rose bush, you know, is one of my favorites. In the last couple years, I dealt with some armored scale on it. And what I did was trimmed off the extremely infected parts and use all seasons dormant oil on anything infected by scale, and it has been coming back very well. Scale for me is something I always had on indoor plants, like house plants over the winter. It was not something I was dealing with on outdoor plants until the last couple of years. So I had a couple Ito peonies that late in the season I noticed had really bad scale. It doesn't kill them because they die back to the ground, but it really does weaken them over that season, which doesn't help them in the long run. So all seasons dormant oil is my best defense against scale. I use it on my lilacs too, my old-fashioned ones, because they get scale really bad. And I don't have any to show you, thankfully, right now, but if I did, you could spray it. It's called all seasons because unlike just dormant oil, you spray when things are dormant. All seasons dormant oil, you can spray anytime. So it works really well on things like rose bushes, when you have to deal with that. As we work down here, you're gonna see one of my favorite Ito peonies. I love this Bartzella. Bartzella is the yellow Ito peony, and look at the blooms. They are about the size of my hand. So I'll show you for reference. If you put my hand in here, look at that. That's beautiful. That is about a probably 7 to 8 inch bloom on some of them. And there's still so many more blooms to come. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm counting 6 or 7 still blooms, and right now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some in the back, 6, 7, 8 big blooms on it. So I should cut some now and bring them in. It's just one of my favorites because it does so much blooming and it is so easy to grow. You know, it's a little bit again more expensive than just a traditional garden peony, but once you see the colors show up in your yard, you understand why it's worth it. And it's such a hardy plant like all peonies are. In front of it, some Millennium Allium is just about to bloom, which is really early, but we had so much warmth that I think it is early. Here's the new tree peony we just planted. And interspersed in here, I do have some garden phlox. They're all white phlox, if I remember right. And I started dotting those in a few years ago, and it's nice to have kind of more of a later or midsummer bloom like those. This peony is one of my favorites. It's gonna be a deep magenta. I got it from a friend. You know, so many peonies you can split. The best time to split them is in September. Just make sure you don't plant them too deep because if you plant them too deep, they don't bloom well. But this is that deep, deep, dark magenta pink. More Ito peony. I mean, look at all the different colors you can get on an Ito peony. It's so, so beautiful. And then it's coupled with this above and beyond rose that I trim this back really hard every year, and look still how it does. A cardinal has a nest in there right now. See that nest? And she is squawking over in the garden watching me. So we won't stay here too long because I want her to come back because I love that I have cardinal babies. Right in front of here are some more than herbaceous peonies. And then this tree peony bloomed a few weeks ago. So you can see the seed head on it. That one's a couple years, I don't know, probably 3 years old. And so slowly it's starting to get bigger and it has more blooms on it every year, and that's kind of the best part. And then a big another Bartzella yellow peony. And I don't know why this one blooms later, but it does. And I'm totally fine with that because then it just extends the season for blooms. I think the best part of peonies is they are so fleeting, but that means you just really have to enjoy them. And what I started doing a few years ago was getting much better at bringing in blooms to the house to enjoy. Because if you don't, the sun, the wind, a hard storm or rain can really just kind of take all the blooms away. And then the season feels over. Now, I don't too often save the blooms at the marshmallow stage like I said you can do. I've done it a couple times. It works really well. It's just more fridge space. I have more garden produce that I'm saving usually by that point. And it just is one of those things that I just haven't gone too hard into. But if you have a wedding coming up or you have a big party and you want peonies for it, it's a great way to be able to use them. So I thought we should quick run over to Mom's so I can show you the mixture of peonies I have at her house so you can really kind of see how I use peonies in different ways in both yards. We just drove over to Mom's house. It's like 1/8 of a mile from my house. And this is a garden in a flower bed that I put in. It started around 2016. And so it's really mostly completed in 2017 and everything's just been growing since then. The garden really consisted of starting with a low limestone wall that just kind of finishes what I would say what feels like the upper east lawn down into the orchard. And so to do that, it's a real beautiful mix of perennials here. So lots of Ito peonies, herbaceous peonies, so you can see some of the similar ones that I have. She also has some pure white herbaceous peonies. I don't have these for some reason, but I can always come over here and get them. She has a couple tree peonies that have been doing so well. And see, they do get a little bit of afternoon shade, and that could help them even do better. But I mean, look at some of these Ito peonies. The colors on them are just fantastic. Now, if we go around the edge here and around the corner, this is my favorite view of this whole garden. So you can see as we back up, you're getting a beautiful mix of textures and color, and this is just the beginning. So right now we have a lot of the herbaceous peonies that are just beginning to grow. So these are now getting at marshmallow stage, which I can show you now. See how I can squeeze that slightly? So this one could be cut down at the stem. It could be this one too. Yep, they're all about at marshmallow stage when they get that big. And they could be saved. And you can see though how beautiful and big they're gonna be. Now they're mixed in with some boxwood for structure, lots of garden phlox, lots of globe master allium. Also, this is my favorite plant. It's an ornamental turkey rhubarb. Look at this rhubarb. Now, okay, here's a big one right here. What I love about this is it's not an edible rhubarb. It's purely ornamental, but look at the back of the leaves. My favorite view right here is those dark red stems that just show the veins and almost like a bronze undertone. Do you see that of the leaf? It's just beautiful. And I think it's just such a fun texture to have in the back of this big bed. And we have lots of Baptisia here, yellow Baptisia. There's like the false indigo, the more traditional purple, more of that turkey rhubarb. So you can see I do the same elements with different plants I do in my yard where I mimic them and I repeat them going down the line. I find in general my eye feels, let's say, most pleased when I pick certain plants and I repeat them in various ways. Sometimes it's with different colors, but I think the repeating of plants that work well not only help you as a gardener know what's going to work well, but also kind of gives an eye the chance to become a little bit acclimated and kind of comfortably familiar with what you're doing as you work on down. I just think there's nothing, I mean, look at that beautiful Ito peony again, mixed with those beautiful allium that are popping out all along down. Big and beautiful peonies, the phlox. Again, the turkey rhubarb actually does get a bloom just like traditional rhubarb does. Some years I've cut it off, but lately I've been leaving it because it's just fun. Like, why cut it off, right? And as we work on down, there's the false indigo. Look how beautiful that is. That's so pretty to use in a flower arrangement. And then it'll get these big seed pods on it, which is still just as fun. And here I just let things get as big as they can. So there's a huge garden phlox. That will just be full of blooms later on the season. She usually has some delphinium in here. You can see there's some poppies right there. It's really a mixture because what I tried to do was there was an older garden that I removed when I put in all this and I saved a lot of the plants from that. There's lots of large lilies in the back, a lot of Asiatic lilies, and a lot of those get really tall, and so they kind of just dance above all these other plants. So when one thing gets done blooming, like a peony, for instance, something else like the lilies will happen, and then eventually there's even some asters here that will come in later in the season. This kind of gives you that backed up view of kind of just like the whole length of the bed. There's a boxwood I need to replace. Yes, if you see that brown boxwood, it needs to be replaced. But all along this bed, there's like various textures and color going on. And what's really nice is even in the winter, everything kind of dies back and goes dormant, but the boxwood always leaves some structure, which was really important to me. Since this bed is down by the orchard, it's really kind of a secret spot, which is what I like. You know, up here on the other side of the bed, you go up about 2 steps. I'll show you here. And you go through just a little bit of an entryway there. See those 2 stone columns? And then you're up and you have a line of boxwood. But if you remember last year, what we put in was this big bed all along the road that's just beginning. So it has a lot of kind of the same drought tolerant plants that I use, salvias to some ornamental grasses, to penstemon, rudbeckia, and all those kind of mix up here really well. Down here though, then you get that mix of almost a little bit more of an English garden. And I think that's really important to have that mixture. And I know it's something Mom really enjoys. So that's what this bed down here was all about, was making sure Mom still got a lot of the blooms she enjoyed. And it's just kind of one of my favorite spots. I think eventually it'd be fun to have kind of what feels like a terrace here. So you come out and kind of entertain here if you wanted to. Kind of a beautiful spot, wouldn't it? I hope you enjoyed. This really video turned into one that was all about peonies, but also a little bit of some mini garden tours showing what's blooming. You know, that's what's hard is, I said I want to do a tour every month, but this is actually taking place in the same month I did first garden tour. It's just that so much has happened in between now and that video that I want to show you some of those things, because peonies are so fleeting that if we don't catch them right now, you may not see them by the next garden tour. So there's little bits and pieces, but it's always fun to kind of show different things at different times, and every year it happens at a little bit different time, never the exact same timing. So let me know what's happening in your garden. I always love to hear what you're planting, what you're picking, what's blooming, and what you're enjoying, because that's how we learn from each other and just kind of how we get excited. So happy gardening, friends. I, of course, have more to go do, as I'm sure you do too.